everyone.
Hey everyone,
I'm Dr. Krista Burris,
and I'm Dr. Michael Kim.
and we're here with Coachella Valley Direct Primary Care to talk about COVID today, which is, what is today?
30.
June 30th. Wow, we made it halfway through the year.
It's officially halfway, huh?
Yeah, 2021. So,
Well, how are you today?
I'm doing good. It's a little warm out there, so I'm trying to stay cool, but overall good. How about you?
It's humid.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Florida, and the humidity, this is not as bad as Florida, but it's not as hot as it could be, but the humidity makes it just horrible. So.
Yeah, and shout out to all of our friends up there in the Pacific Northwest who've been sweltering in heat that normally we experience, but our whole lives are set up to deal with heat, and theirs aren't. So I do feel for you.
Yeah, and then, what is it? You can't use your swamp cooler if it gets to a certain humidity level.
Yeah.
So that's probably affecting some people too, but
sure.
In any case.
Well, let's get started talking about the Coachella Valley coronavirus situation. We've been doing this now for like a year and a few months, year and change. And honestly, through the ups and downs of everything, we've seen some pretty predictable patterns. And now it looks like we're kind of in what I would call a low-level transmission state where COVID's not gone, but it's tamped down to the point where we're able to restart most of our activities. So that's really great. The Delta variant's still out there, and I think we'll talk about that. But I wanted to update you first with the county's information regarding this is their daily summary. And what you'll see here is that we're still having a fair number of new cases and deaths per day. And we'll probably see these numbers go up and down based on when things are getting reported out and just sort of coincidental blips in the data. But it is good to keep in mind that coronavirus is still out there. It's not gone. And it is still a risk to people who are vulnerable to it. And long-term COVID is still a risk for people who do contract coronavirus. Let's go down to the bottom of this, and we can see the overall trend. So if you look at this, remember the green bars are actually the tests that are being done, and the yellow dots are the percentage of the tests that are coming back positive. So this sort of is a correlate for how much disease is out there, but it's not exactly case numbers. It is the positivity rate, though, and you'll see that our positivity rate is kind of holding steady in the ones, but it still has the ability to kind of trend back upward. And when we're most concerned about that happening is as we go towards the fall, because that's when respiratory illnesses tend to spike. And you'll see that last year we started seeing that increase there in the late November area. So we'll kind of keep an eye on this. It looks like we're getting through summer pretty good. Honestly, we aren't having much of a summer surge this year. And so hopefully if we do see a bit of a blip this winter, will be small. So let's go to our next slide. This is our weekly Coachella Valley summary. And you'll see here, we actually have seen an increase in cases this week. The new weekly cases of 82, that's about double what we saw last week. And honestly, we are seeing that bear out in the number of tests that we're doing. We're doing more tests, and we're seeing them come back positive slightly more often. So I suspect the Delta variant was identified in LA a couple weeks ago. And I suspect what we're seeing is some of the impact of that we are seeing some breakthrough cases and some cases in people who are unvaccinated. I have personally seen cases of COVID in people who are vaccinated. They tend to be people whose immune systems aren't great, so maybe they didn't have a good response to the vaccine in the first place. But luckily, no one I've seen has been sick enough to need hospitalization. So in real life, it does look like the vaccine is living up to the hype. It's protecting people against that severe disease. But it is good to keep in mind that even if you're vaccinated, it's not 100% that you couldn't catch it and potentially transmit it as well. So now I wanted to give us a little moment to congratulate us. Let's go to the next slide. These are the vaccination rates by city. And what we're looking at here is the percent of the population that's partially or fully vaccinated in the population on record that's 12 and over. So you'll see that some of the communities actually have gone over 100%. And the reason they do that is because if somebody's address is not given at the time of their vaccination, they are counted as a resident of the city where they received their vaccination. If you happened to give your home address, you're counted for your home address. So there were some very large basically outreach vaccination clinics in Mecca. So if you go down to the M's, you'll see Mecca is like killing it, man. They're like 125% of their population got vaccinated. But that's representative of there were a fair number of people vaccinated at those clinics that didn't have or didn't provide a home address. So they get counted under Mecca's numbers. But overall, you'll see that we really did some great work. Same thing with Palm Desert here. We're at 90%, Palm Springs at 98%. Again, Palm Springs had a really large vaccination clinic run by the county, and that's why their numbers are probably a little falsely elevated, but really good. Rancho Mirage, same thing, 100%, over 100%. The reason for that is Eisenhower's vaccination clinic, these mass vaccination sites. There's always going to be a few people whose address sort of ends up being the vaccination site. Eisenhower closed their big vaccination clinic this week, and they gave excess of 45,000 vaccinations there. So they really contributed a lot to our community's protection. And so overall, you'll see just really, not bad Coachella Valley, honestly. We still have some areas that need probably some more attention to get their numbers up. Usually this is because of lack of access to vaccine, either because of the time that vaccines are given, transportation problems, and sometimes just knowing where to go. So we still have a little bit of work to do as a county, but overall, I think we can be really proud of ourselves. I think we did good.
So, there's a lot that we could talk about. So I'll let you choose what's your...
What? Well, do you have anything that you've heard from people that they've been asking about or worried about, questions about?
Yes, and but we can...
Okay.
We can talk about that. I'll ask it because I'm sure there's no topic that we can't wrangle.
I had somebody ask me a question that I thought was really a decent question, and they asked if they had previously received the J&J vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson, And then now, in light of the Delta variant, should they go back and get one dose of a different vaccine like the Pfizer or the Moderna? There is no guidelines from the CDC about doing this. There is a study that's in process to see if that's something that we want to recommend, but the results aren't back yet. So because of that, I sort of gave an answer like it might help, but we don't have any firm recommendation because that study is ongoing. We don't have any safety data for doing that. Theoretically, it should be fine. In fact, there are many doctors who are actually recommending it because theoretically it actually should improve your protection. Now that vaccine is plenty available, I think if you are a person, especially if you're in a high-risk category and you receive the J&J vaccine, if you were nervous about whether or not you had good protection, I don't think at this point that we know of a downside to going back and getting one of the other vaccines. I don't think we have as much rational thought to actually do the 2-shot series if you've already had the J&J. At this point, I think 1 shot would probably be sufficient to give you any potential extra protection. If you received the Moderna or the Pfizer, right now their protection against the Delta variant is really very good. So I don't think that there's as much benefit if you're one of those people to going back and getting a J&J vaccine. So it's more if you got the J&J vaccine, its protection against the Delta variant is a little lower. So it's not a recommendation, but it is something that has some rational, reasonable thought behind it. But again, that study's not quite out yet. In the same vein, we don't know yet about boosters. There's no sign yet that vaccine protection is waning in the people who were in those initial studies. In fact, it looks like, at least with the Pfizer and Moderna information coming out, that the antibody protection is actually better than they thought it would be for long-term protection, because the vaccine actually activated what are called B cells. So those are cells that sort of hang out and remember the virus longer, sort of like having something in long-term storage and not just putting it in your, on the counter. So you've got a little bit held in reserve for later if you need to fight that virus.
So again, this is not official recommendations. This is just two people's thoughts.
Yeah.
But in my little world of brain, for me, it would make more sense if you got the J&J to maybe get another J&J, because you didn't react. That is, if you didn't react to the vaccine, that you would probably tolerate the J&J, and that there probably is the same booster effect as the 2 Pfizers or the 2 Modernas, rather than switching over to a brand new one. I mean, the thought going from J&J to Pfizer or Moderna is now you're crossing different, type of vaccines, so you might even get even a broader protection. But it would make more sense to me is if you got the J&J to try to get the J&J, and then you'll be like the Moderna or the Pfizer, you've got a 2-step.
But I don't think we have that data back yet either.
No, but this is armchair quarterbacking. No data is out there, but in my little brain, that makes more sense. I mean,
I
would
cross vaccine types, because that seems to be where you get the more robust immune response. But, I think that we're arguing about stuff that we can't know at this point.
Well, I would say, getting 2, no matter how. But if it was me, I'd be like, I'll get the J&J because I got it already. And the two synergistically should work almost as good of effect or even as good as the two Pfizers or the two Modernas, because it's a booster effect.
You think? Yeah.
Well, everything is a thought.
Yeah.
Nothing is a for sure.
So there you go. Two different opinions about that one.
And so, is there anything else quickly before we go to our next show you wanted to talk about?
Yes, LA has reinstated its recommendation, not mandate, for universal masking indoors. Riverside County has not done that. And people are, wondering, well, why did they do that? And it puts businesses in a bit of a bind again, because now it puts the onus back on the business owner to make a policy and enforce it in their own store. So it's, I think, a little bit clanky. I understand why they did it, though, because they are trying to head off that winter surge. So they know they have about half of their population unprotected by vaccine. And they know that their Delta variant is spreading rapidly. And they know that people who have been vaccinated can still get it, can still spread it. And they know that if 80% of people take off their masks, the other 20% probably will too, because of peer pressure. So I think that this was a way for them to try to get ahead of the curve and maybe head off problems. But they didn't want to go all the way to a mandate when there's really no public health reason to do that. But we'll see if it works. I think this is definitely going to be a political hot potato this fall. I think a lot of cities and places will want to try to avoid the issue and just do what LA did, which is make recommendations but not mandate anything. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And the only thing I wanted to say is it's here. Most likely the Delta variant is in the valley. We know that there's been some small outbreaks in some organizations. Mm-hmm. And so we got a positive yesterday. So we haven't seen a positive COVID in a rapid for, a month and a half, 2 months. Yeah. No, we're having a month or two. So, be careful out there. Stay safe, get vaccinated if you can. If you have any questions, please let us know or ask your provider. They are pretty safe vaccines. So please join us on our next show, which is late. We apologize, but your personal health. And thank you for joining us.